Welcome, everyone. I'm Mary Ray, co-founder of MyMSTeam, the largest and fastest growing social network for people with MS. Personally, I first learned about MS through my mother-in-law, who passed away the year we launched MyMSTeam in 2013. Her strength of character continues to inspire me as MyMSTeam continues to grow, with over 177,000 members today. That's 1 in 6 people living with MS in the United States. We are so excited. Already, we have nearly 200 people who have pre-registered for tonight's event. I know folks are still joining the room. Feel free to, in chat, put where you're coming from for this special live Q&A event. I'm even more excited to welcome back one of my favorite guests and friend who has a great sense of humor, his own YouTube channel with more than 32,000 subscribers who love his videos, which cover a range of MS topics, and an insightful video and article series on MyMSTeam, Dr. Aaron Boster. Dr. Boster is a neurology specialist focused on MS and is the president and founder of the Boster Center for Multiple Sclerosis and a great friend to us here at MyMSTeam. Welcome, Dr. Boster.
Mary, I have been looking forward to this all week. It is so exciting to be back with you and MyMSTeams. Thank you very much. This is going to be a great night.
Yeah, I totally agree. We've collected a lot of questions tonight. The themes are around managing fatigue, stress, and pain related to MS, the classic three. And as usual, due to high demand, we're going to provide a recording of this event for those who are missing it tonight. And by the way, we have more MS events in 2022, so do stay tuned for more information about that. And also follow MyMSTeam news for highlights. Today, the questions that have been collected, if you didn't, we've collected so many. And again, if you didn't send one in and you've just arrived, don't worry. You'll have a chance to send in questions through the Q&A Zoom feature, which you can see at the bottom of your screen throughout. Please note that Dr. Boster isn't able to answer specific medical questions in this forum, and those really should be addressed by your own doctor. Okay, to start off tonight, Dr. Boster, it's been a little while. Could you just touch on very slightly your own personal connection to MS? Many of your great fans know about this already, but could you just touch on that before we get started?
With pleasure, absolutely. Like you, MS was something very personal for me. I grew up in a very close-knit family where my uncle had MS. In fact, I don't have a memory of him without MS. In age 12, I promised my mother that I would learn to do it better than the men that were taking care of my family. No one should make a family feel that scared and that alone. And so I had a very directed course. I was the weirdo in high school that said, I want to be an MS doctor. And it's been almost mission driven. I'm trying to improve the lives of families impacted by MS. It's with that vigor that I'm excited to start to answer these questions and hopefully up someone's game and make them feel more confident in these symptoms, because they're nasty symptoms.
Yeah. Speaking of one of which is pain, and we have this first question from Tom. So he doesn't want to move at all. So then he gets fatigued because he's feeling lazy from not moving, and it causes clearly a vicious cycle. Do you have any insights on how people can stop the pain fatigue cycle?
Yes. So there's the first thing is MS causes lots and lots of kinds of pain, and immobility can exacerbate that. And that's what I'm hearing here. And so if you overexert, then you have some motor fatigue and heat sensitivity and some deconditioning that takes over. But if you're still, pain can intensify. And so we want to try to kind of find a balance. Let me give you some suggestions. For example, start the day with a stretching regimen. That's not going to tax your muscles too much. It's going to help with spasticity. It's going to get you limbered up. And it's going to help when you start your day. Stretch in the middle of your workday. Quite literally, like if you have a lunch break, take 5-10 minutes and stretch out. Again, you're not overexerting yourself, but you're really stretching out sore muscles. You're repositioning yourself. You're kind of bringing blood into areas. And lastly, I would stretch one more time before I go to bed. Some of my patients have significant spasticity. I practice in Ohio where it gets awful cold this time of year, and spasticity is always worse when it's cold out. And so sometimes people find that if they spend $20 or $40 and they buy a under the desk pedaler where they put their feet on it and they just very passively pedal, they're not doing it to raise their heart rate. They're doing it to keep their legs limber, because if they stop moving, they get stiff and hurt. So there's a host of things that can be done. You don't have to go running to keep moving. Even going up at the top really pay dividends.
That's great. So stretching and even subtle mobility, whatever you can do to get done, that's good feedback. Are there things related to the pain fatigue cycle that folks should ask their neurologist about?
Definitely. So the first thing is pain is not something that you should put up with, right? So if you're hurting, I don't want you just to say, well, that's too bad. That's part of MS. Nuh-uh. That's something that we can treat. And if your neurologist says that MS doesn't cause pain, that's false. So I want you to hear that. MS causes lots of different kinds of pain. And you're allowed to want that to be better. And so sometimes patients and families have to be self-advocates and say, no, doctor, you don't understand. I know you can't see it, but it hurts really bad. And I need some help with it. And you may even want to follow it up and say that you're not looking for narcotics. Narcotics don't work to treat most of MS pain. And there is a national crisis surrounding narcotics. And so a lot of doctors are skittish, and you tell them, look, that's not what I'm asking for. I'm asking to not hurt really badly, and I'm asking for you to help me. And if you're not able to do that, okay, but would you please send me to someone with expertise? Because that is an entire medical subspecialty, pain management. And the guys and gals that do it are really, really good at it.
So there are three things I heard here that folks should keep in mind when talking to their own doctor, neurologist, when trying to broach this topic of pain. One is to not be afraid to say, I'm experiencing pain and I want to stop this. Help me with that. Two, I'm not seeking narcotics. I'm seeking to stop the pain. And three, if you cannot help me, I would like a referral, please, to someone who specializes in pain management. The key phrasing is pain management there, because that is a specialty. That's great. And, on this topic of pain, Terry has a question about something that you probably hear a lot about. And it's not the pain in her rib cage. She wants to know, is this pain around her rib cage the infamous MS hug? And if so, what solutions can people do to combat that feeling, that sensation of the MS hug?
So I'm hearing two things that are really important. The first one, the person asking the question is making a great point. Your body does not come with a rule book or like an answer key. When you experience something, you experience a symptom. So it hurts in your rib cage. You don't know why. So you could have a rib cage that hurts because of a heart problem or a lung problem or a throat problem or a broken rib or an MS hug. And so I love the question, because as a human, you just experience a symptom. And what I want you to do is to try to describe it as best you can. I oftentimes say, if you're talking to your very best girlfriend, how would you describe the discomfort? What words would you use? Is it sharp, dull, burning, aching? That's the character of the pain. What makes it worse? What makes it better? I mean, if you take a deep breath and it hurts, that tells me what kind of pain it might be. And so we really need to delve in and ask a bunch of questions. What have you tried that's worked? What have you tried that's not worked? Have you ever had it before? What rating would you give it? Et cetera, et cetera. Let's say, for the sake of our discussion, that this is an MS hug type pain. So let's pretend that we've sorted that out. So there's a lot of ways of addressing it. And most of them that I use are medical. They're pills. So we can use medicines that are invented for seizures to treat MS hug, believe it or not. So the drug of choice is a seizure medicine. And why? Because it stabilizes cell membranes. And it stabilizes the cell membranes in the spinal cord that are sending a fake message, causing your ribs to clamp down and hurt. You can also sometimes use antispasmodics that'll help. And one of my favorite maneuvers when all else fails is very careful Botox to the muscles between the ribs. The point here is, first we have to dig in and figure out what's causing the pain. Then we have to figure out which modalities will work. And as I've shared, there's a bunch of different modalities.
Thank you for that. Robert wants to know if he's actually feeling pain. Does that mean he's actively, this word that I'm about to say and butcher, demyelinating?
Demyelinating, yeah. So he's asking, if I have a pain, does that mean I'm having an attack? Like, is that a new demyelinating event? And the real answer is, I don't have enough information, right? But generally speaking, no. Now, if you have pain and it's the very first time you ever had it, like so you have a burning in your hand, you've never had that before, and it sticks around for longer than a day, yes, I would very much like you to bring that to the attention of your neurologist, because a new neurological symptom lasting longer than a day is something that we want to work up for possible attack. But it doesn't have to be an MS attack. As I mentioned a little earlier, there's lots of different reasons that MS can cause pain. Not all of them are brand new attacks. And so what I want you to do is bring it to the attention of your doctor without fear, fear that it's a scary thing, and work with your doctor to try to figure it out so that we can make it better.
Okay. So more than one day, just keeping track of that. It's more than one day, bring it to the attention. Artemis is asking if there are any lifestyle or other non-medication changes she can make to improve the fatigue and the stress that come from always being fatigued. Now that's interesting to me.
Yes.
The stress of being fatigued, just compounding the fatigue.
Let's talk about fatigue, Mary, and then let's come back to stress related to fatigue, because in MS, that is very, very real. That's an actual issue that we have to grapple with, which you might not have to grapple with in other conditions. So if we talk about fatigue for a second, fatigue is the single most common symptom in MS across all age groups, across all disease states, and it's the leading cause of loss of work amongst people impacted by MS. So this is very serious stuff. I would submit to you, Mary, that most spouses do not understand the person with MS's fatigue because they have no frame of reference, the severity of the fatigue. The very best I've ever come to describing it is as follows. So you fly out to sunny Columbus, Ohio, and bring your winter gear, please. And we're going to go spend the day at the clinic, and then we'll go have dinner. And then you go to your hotel. Do not sleep tonight. Okay. I want you to watch as many of my YouTube videos as possible. You wake up in the morning and you're going to spend the day at clinic with me again, and then we'll go out to dinner again. And then tomorrow night, don't go to bed, finish watching all my YouTube videos. 2 days from now, you and I are going to go for a stroll and talk about fatigue. That's the best I've come up with to try to help a spouse understand the severity. So what are some non-medicine things that one can do to treat fatigue? Spending time outside in the sun helps fatigue. Exercise, movement helps fatigue. Upping your water game helps fatigue. A nutritious diet, which avoids heavily processed foods and sugar-laden foods, helps fatigue. Supplementing low levels of vitamin D and low levels of B12 helps fatigue.
I was just going to say, as a reminder, these are the lifestyle non-medication changes that are in everyone's hands to control.
Yeah.
So we had talked about mobility before, like just moving is one. The supplements, right? Vitamin D, B12 supplements, of course, getting out in the sun, getting active. These sorts of things all can help. What about just while you're doing all of these things, you're trying to make your best attempt at it, the stress piece of this,
yes.
the sort of mental anguish of not again, but also the social burden that sometimes people feel where people aren't understanding. How would you recommend folks attack that?
First of all, we need to discuss a term called guilt. Because a lot of people with MS have stress surrounding fatigue because they feel guilty. Because the spouse is at work, or the friend is at work, or the world is going on, and they're on the couch because they're so exhausted and they feel guilty. And we have to just do away with that. It simply has to be rolled up into a little ball and flicked across the room, this guilt, because they didn't ask to have MS. They didn't ask to be exhausted, and no one in their right mind would want to be that tired and unable to do things. So we have to just acknowledge you didn't do anything to cause this. Nothing you did cause this. I told a patient this today. Your fatigue is a result of a disease. You have a disease which causes fatigue. And it's not fair to be guilty. So for example, I wear glasses. Without glasses, I can't see the screen. Like, I know you're there because I just saw it, but I don't know who you are. I mean, I can't read anything. I have no shame. I have no guilt. I have no stress about wearing glasses. In fact, I think I'm smart for wearing glasses because now I can see you. In a similar fashion, treating fatigue, there should be no shame in that game. None. There should be no guilt associated with trying to address fatigue. And I can't stress that enough.
So included in that addressing is also taking the time to preserve and conserve energy, right?
Well, someone who's resting is smart. You're not resting because you're lazy. You're resting because your body's telling you you need to rest. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's someone who is intelligent. You're absolutely right. And so we need to do away with that. And we need to make sure that family understands. I've had patients where the spouse comes home and says, "What have you done today? What have you, I've done this, I've done that. What have you done today?" And to me, that's an opportunity to educate a spouse. Because if that person could be more productive, they would love to be more productive. And so I maybe I'll finish answering that question just by saying that we have to do away with guilt, and we have to recognize it's a symptom of a disease, and we have to treat that symptom. And sometimes treating the symptom is to take a nap, and there's no shame in that, none.
I would love to see our MyMSTeam members talk about this too. Of what kind of metaphors do you use to try to communicate with friends and family where they actually get it? You know, Dr. Boster used this comparison of glasses, like, you know, that's the smart thing to do. You know, energizing yourself, your batteries, the spoons theory, the spoons idea, right? Like, I only have so many spoons to spare today, and I've used them all. So anyway, if you can go to MyMSTeam and chat about that, that'd be great. In the meantime, we do have our first poll question of the day. Do you find that a lot of your patients, this is a question. This is the question. What helps you manage your own fatigue the best? And check all that apply. So eating right, exercising, taking it easy, getting better sleep, physical occupational therapy, changing meds, meditation, mindfulness, and nothing helps. I'm sure it's like you've already recognized, Dr. Boster, it's not going to be any one silver bullet.
It's going to be a constellation of things. It's a network of things.
Absolutely. So while folks are answering, do you find a lot of your patients say that some of those changes you've recommended, these lifestyle changes, have helped them? Okay.
You know, maybe the most impactful lifestyle change, which we haven't talked about yet, is sleeping. So a lot of folks don't get adequate sleep. They're setting themselves up for failure because they're only budgeting for 5 hours of sleep, or they're only budgeting for 6 hours of sleep, meaning they're entering the bed at midnight and their alarm is set for 5 or 6 a.m. So even before we start the day, we've cut our legs off, so to speak, because you're not getting adequate restorative sleep. Budgeting enough time to get the snooze in and making sure that the quality of your sleep is adequate so that when you wake up, you're rested is a very important tool. And I can't tell you how often we try to burn the candle at both ends and steal time at the cost of our health. And in MS, that's so true.
Especially this time of year. A lot of people are experiencing that. And I'm going to get to our next question, sort of related to that. But before we do, let's see what our audience has said. What were your answers to what you do? Okay, eating right, exercising, rest, and the better sleep takes the lead. I'm glad you added that. Better sleep takes the lead.
You know, I do want to, I'm an allopathic, I'm an MD. And so I do want to touch on medicine for just a hot second. It's not the focus, I hope, of our discussion, but there are medicines that are used very frequently in MS for bladder dysfunction, for mood, for pain, for spasticity, which make you super tired. And so if you're trying to live your best life and not be exhausted, one of the things you want to do is you want to look at your medicines and ask the doc, say, which ones of these are contributing to my fatigue, and which ones can we remove, and which ones can we cut in half? Likewise, if we treat certain things, we can treat fatigue with medicines, Provigils and Nuvigils and Adderalls and Ritalins. And one of my faves is to treat depression, which then in turn improves energy. And so there are many, many allopathic medical things that can be done. Now, nobody does that in a vacuum, and pills by themselves do not make this better. It's a group effort, but they do play a role, or they can play a role.
Great. And, you know, I just mentioned that it's this time of year, end of the year, a lot of holidays are happening in December, and we're approaching another major one, right? Christmas is around the corner. There's New Year's, and then just this seeing friends and family that maybe people haven't seen during the pandemic, getting together. That causes a lot of fatigue. Even sending out Christmas cards can cause a lot of fatigue. Linda wants to know, who's with us in the audience right now, how does she know what's normal fatigue and what's MS-driven fatigue?
I would challenge Linda and say, that's not the question. I'm not trying to be difficult, Linda, because the reality is you're you and you're living your best life. And some of the fatigue may be because of one cause, some of the fatigue may be from another cause, but that's less relevant. My goal is that you have enough energy that you can have a fantastic holiday. And so really, when I try to manage fatigue with a family, I'm really trying to look at every angle. And sometimes it's cutting out diet soda. Sometimes it's taking a medicine. Sometimes it's getting on an exercise regimen. And I don't care why. I care if we have results. I saw a patient today with really bad fatigue, and it turns out the thing we need to do is correct her thyroid dysfunction. And so she had fatigue, and so we had to dig in and try to figure that out.
That's great. And I appreciate the fact that, again, the approach you're thinking about is a sort of a constellation approach. It takes more than one thing or combination. Still on the topic of fatigue, Angel has a question. She says, exercise does help her get rid of fatigue, but some days she's just too tired. Does sitting or even lying down exercise help boost energy? She doesn't know or feel it does. I know you had just talked about the pedal mechanism underneath a table or something that somebody can use. So I'm guessing your answer is yes, any movement. Do you have particular ones in mind where it's something that somebody can do sitting or lying down?
Yes. So let me share with you an approach to exercise, which has served my patients very well. And it's the opposite of the high school mentality. So the high school mentality is summarized as if you run 1 mile, I can run 2. And if I can run 2, then I can probably run 4. And if I take a day off, let's just forget it and go eat pizza. And that doesn't serve us very well as adults in the real world, particularly adults in the real world with chronic conditions. So what I want you to do is I want you to use the next day after your workout as your metric for if you overdid it. Very often during the excitement of the gym moment, we can push ourselves and we can pull something off that's great. We do 15 minutes, we do X, we do number of reps. But then we may find that the next day we're in bed. And I call that the devil's price. And so what I want you to do with your exercise, I want you to start insanely small, something that is not even going to make you physically fit yet. But I want to make sure that the next day that you can have a normal day. If you have to spend the day in bed, that's too much. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes people think back to the heyday of high school when they could run 4 miles, except they've had MS for 20 years and they're now in their 50s and they haven't exercised in a long time. They can't do that anymore, nor should they try. And so we don't start off running 4 miles. We start off by walking around the block. And we very, very slowly build that up. And if you go low and slow, I feel like there's almost no barrier. You can just keep going.
Consistency, right? Adhering to sort of a mobility or exercise. Consistency is key here, it sounds like.
Presenteeism. If you put on your Lululemon and you get on your cool sneakers and you get on the treadmill, I give you full credit for the day. I don't care how often you walk, because I know that if you get on the Lululemon and you get on the elliptical or the treadmill twice a week, eventually you're going to start walking. And so quite literally, we're looking for presenteeism.
Presenteeism. I love that phrasing. Let's be present. Let's show up. That's 99%. That's what I'm hearing. So really, for movement to be part of your everyday routine, don't make it such that you're going to be wiped out the next day. Do listen to your body and try to do maybe something that makes you want to do even more. So do a little less than you think you can do. Do less than you can do, perhaps, right, Dr. Boster?
Correct. Yep. Spot on. I love it.
As mentioned before, communicating can be really hard, and simply getting other people to understand the symptoms is an issue we hear constantly from MyMSTeam members. And Tia wants to know, what suggestions you have for navigating family dynamics when people are dealing with what she calls the invisible disease, what many call the invisible disease. And I would also add perhaps dealing with friends and family who may have deaf ears when it comes to understanding the invisible disease.
Yep. So the first comment is, you're not nuts. They just don't understand. So you're not wrong. You really feel the way you feel, and they just don't see it. And I want you to hear that, because sometimes people start to question themselves, and they kind of wonder, am I making it up? No, you're not making it up. It's real. Now, Mary, you touched on spoon theory, and I would like to kind of flush that out a little bit, because I do think it's a very powerful tool, and it's arguably one of the best ways I can recommend to help a family or a loved one or a friend understand fatigue. Now, spoon theory, I did not invent, and it was not first discussed in the setting of MS, but it was discussed in a different chronic condition called lupus. And there was a gal with lupus that kind of came up with this theory, and gosh, I like it. And so I use it a lot when talking to families. So the idea here is, we're going to give a unit of energy a spoon. So a spoon represents one of your units of energy. And when you wake up in the morning, you wake up with all the spoons you're going to have. So if I had a bunch of spoons right now, I'd show them to you. I'd be like, these are all my spoons. And as you go about your day, you use up spoons. So let's say I wake up with 50 spoons, and brushing my teeth and going to the bathroom is a spoon, and taking a shower, getting dressed is a spoon, and getting some breakfast and that's a spoon. And then I take a spoon to get my dog and myself to work. Then maybe the first hour of my day is 3 spoons, and you get the point. I'm using up units of energy as I go about my day. The problem is, when you wake up with MS, you start your day with 15 spoons, not 50, 15. And so by noon, you have used up all your spoons. You don't have any more spoons left. And that's an analogy that a lot of families can understand. And you can take it a step further and say, therefore, I will bank spoons. Yes, I could pick the kids up at school, and I could do the groceries, and I could pick up the laundry, and I could get dinner on the table. Except then I'm going to crash, and I'm not going to be able to function the rest of the evening. I'm not going to be able to function tomorrow morning. So I'm only going to do 2 of those things. I'm going to do the other 2 tomorrow. I'm going to bank some spoons because I need to store some energy. And I have found that discussion to be really impactful when trying to help families understand the concepts of fatigue. That's
great. And a good reminder, and something, clearly many of us in the community who talk about it kind of take that for granted. This is more of a thank you acknowledgement, Dr. Boster, as I'm just going to share. This is not a question, but at our last event, Art had asked you, how can he stop urinating during the night so he doesn't wake up as often? Because we had talked about sleep, the importance of sleep, and the disruption of it. And he just wanted to let you know how grateful he is for the tip you gave him. And this was the tip that you gave him. He said that he usually has beer or wine with dinner. And he wanted to let you know he did the experiment you suggested, which is drinking half a beer with dinner and alternating with water and eating a little earlier. And that really did help. And but then he has a quick follow-up question. Is drinking alcohol in moderation okay when facing fatigue, stress, or pain?
So I do not promote. Well, first of all, thank you for sharing that. That makes me feel awesome. And I'm really, really glad to know that helped you. Like, it fills a bucket for me. So yay. So thank you for sharing that. That's awesome. So I don't recommend teetotaling. I'm not promoting that you should never, ever touch alcohol if you have MS. That's not what I'm suggesting. I do think that moderation is important. Alcohol is something that suppresses the frontal lobes and the cerebellum, and it can increase risk of falls and poor decisions sometimes. And so I'm not telling you not to drink. I think having a beer with dinner is most awesome, but I think having a beer with dinner, not 7 beers with dinner, is awesome. And so I am not telling you no. A couple caveats when dealing with MS. MS medicines sometimes interact with alcohol. And sometimes it can tax your liver because the medicines are being processed by your liver, and so is the alcohol. And so you just want to think about the medicines that you're on, and you may ask your doctor, is it okay to drink with this pill? I think that's a very fair adult question to ask. But right. Ostensibly, I'm not saying no to alcohol. I think that moderation is the answer.
Right. And not necessarily something that you're considering with fatigue management. It's just in general. And it sounds like, all right, you're on your way and that you've addressed the less disruption to your sleep pattern, which is great news. We've seen some clinical studies come through about different diets and their impact on MS symptoms. Do you ever recommend diets for MS, or do you advise people to eat certain ingredients in moderation? And we've touched on this before. Whole foods, whole foods, not so processed foods are definitely the theme. Do you have anything more specific or?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's do 6. We'll just talk about like 6 various things. So,
okay, great.
As it relates to diet, number 1 is upping the water game. All right. So a glass of water with each of 3 meals, glass of water between each meal. That's 5 large glasses of water, putting a kibosh on further fluids after the dinner hour. That's number 1. Number 2, keeping your vitamin D3 levels up. So I want you taking D3. If your levels are low, we need to check the level. It's a blood test. We want to push it above 50, but below 100. And that's a really big, important thing. And so we're doing a lot of supplementation of vitamin D. 15 minutes in a halter top in the sun will give you 5,000 international units of D3. But here in Ohio, nobody's going out with their shirt off right now. It's too cold. So the third thing is and this is a tough one. I'll present it to you as a challenge. Avoid processed foods. Like just completely avoid processed foods. So if you read the ingredients of something, and one of the ingredients you can't pronounce, that's not a food, that's a chemical, and I don't want you to eat it. I basically want you to shop on the perimeter of the grocery store where you'll find ingredients like broccoli, asparagus, milk, right? So in the center of the store, there's no refrigeration. They don't need it because it's not actually food. It's all chemicals and preservatives. And you would be shocked if you cut heavily processed foods out of your diet, what happens to your MS. Likewise, avoiding excessive sugar or sugar-laden foods and avoiding fast food and avoiding soda pop, which for many, many red-blooded Americans is quite a difference from their typical diet, if I'm honest. These are very important things. Now, number 4 or 5, I apologize, I forgot, is not paying attention to what you're eating, but when you're eating. Mm-hmm. It turns out that when you're eating is a really big deal. So Mary, I recently lost over 30 pounds. Right. And I did it not by changing what I was eating as much as when I was eating, because I was snacking from like 5 a.m. until midnight. And I kept my insulin high and I was putting on lots of weight and I didn't fit into my suits and it made me feel sad, blue, and depressed. So I now stop eating at 8 p.m. and I start eating at noon. So I eat from 8 to noon. It's intermittent fasting. I'm not suggesting that people with MS have to do that, although it is safe in MS, but I am challenging you to cut out snacking. Eat your breakfast and then don't eat again until lunch. It's okay. And what that does is something very special. It allows your insulin levels to fall and it allows you to enter in what's called lipolysis, which is a doctor word for burning fat. Now, I think that maybe it was only 5 and I promised 6. So let's just do one more. I think, what's another good one that we want to do?
Sleep?
Well, but I want to do something with nutrition still.
Nutrition, yeah.
So let's do the alcohol in moderation. Let's do that. We'll just add that in. That if you want to have a glass of wine, I think that's great. But I would like it to be one, and it doesn't need to be every single night.
Got it. That's great. Okay. Yeah. I'm still thinking about the fatigue and sleep. That's why it's on my brain right now. And the reason why too, is because our next poll question, in fact, have you found, this is for our audience, have you found any particular diets that help curb your fatigue? And these are listed here. You mentioned alcohol. That's great. Keto, whether cutting out sugar helps. Eating a vegan or vegetarian diet. And of course, maybe there's something else that you're doing. I really appreciate you kind of going over the range of possibilities here. You talked about water as well, right? Increasing water intake. Is there a rule of thumb around water intake based on body weight or anything like that? Are you going to say 8 glasses of water like most people? Or
if you do a glass of water with each of 3 meals and a glass of water between each meal, I think we're having a great discussion. I can tell you like a number of ounces, but like who counts ounces? And
Right.
I want to normalize the activity. You don't need to make it your job. Just drink a glass of water after lunch before you eat dinner.
Right. And then just as a reminder to folks, as we're getting the answers here, the supplements you're most recommending, sunshine, but like D3 and B12, that sounds about right.
Yep.
If there are any
multivitamin.
Great. All right. So let's see how our audience has answered here today.
Love it.
Okay.
I think that is fantastic. I'm really glad to see that the number one is cutting out sugar, because that's been the most impactful thing that I've ever seen with my patients, changing the way that their energy levels are just by cutting out excessive sugar.
And the reason why, Dr. Boster, is just because of the spikes in energy level in insulin. Is that about right?
I think there's a lot. I think that sugar, elevated sugar causes elevated insulin, which can create a ruckus with your metabolism. I also think it contributes to fatigue. What happens, sugar is not satiating. So if you're sad and you eat a colorful cupcake and it makes you feel happy for 4 seconds, it doesn't fill you up, and you'll eat a second and a third and a fourth cupcake. And so instead, if you eat an egg, then you're not going to be full. You're going to have a lot of protein. You're going to have a lot of fat. It's going to fill you up, and it's going to make you satiated. And it's ultimately going to reduce a lot of symptoms in MS, believe it or not.
And there are a lot of great protein alternatives to sugar, clearly, right? I mean, even if people want to research online of some of these whole foods, but like eggs, so simple, right?
Yep, amen.
And somebody did mention, so Teresa did make a quick post and acknowledging this. Alcohol is sugar, and that's totally fair too. There is sugar in alcohol. If people don't realize.
You're absolutely right. And so, if you're that has to factor into your decision making.
Yes, absolutely. Different topic, but this is a very popular one I want to bring up. Trina asks, CBD and medical marijuana are both legal where she lives, and it is here in California, but she hasn't tried either. Have you, and I'm not sure what the regulations are in Ohio, but have you seen these help people with MS, or is that all hype? Okay.
So I am a licensed medical marijuana recommender in the state of Ohio. I have been for about 2 years. And just a very brief discussion about that. When Ohio passed its medical marijuana laws, I was staunchly against them. And the reason I was against them was because there's a lack of science in using cannabis for MS. And I'm a nerd and I like science. And so I was really bothered that we were promoting a treatment without science to back it. And that just didn't sit well with me as a doctor. Then I did something that I should have done earlier, which is I listened to my patients. And Mary, I had these quintessential 70-something old ladies that are wonderful, outstanding members of society that secretly behind closed doors share with me that when their little grandson came from California and gave her a little doobie and she takes a couple hits before bed, she doesn't need my Lyrica and she doesn't need my baclofen and she sleeps through the night and she doesn't wet herself and she wakes up with energy. And I kept hearing a bunch of, quote, older ladies telling me the same thing, and they didn't know each other. So either A, they found each other and they all had a conspiracy to tell Dr. Boster the same set of lies, or B, they were onto something. And the answer was B, by the way. And so I went through the rigor of becoming a medical marijuana recommender here. And I can say with some authority from my own personal experience with my patients that cannabis helps a bunch of stuff in MS. It doesn't slow MS down, and it does not help fatigue directly. But it can help it very much indirectly. There are 4 things that I think cannabis helps with. Number 1 is pain and spasticity. Some of the very best data for cannabis in MS is with MS pain and spasticity across all disease states. And I have been very, very happy to get people off a lot of neuropathic pain medicines and narcotics and spasticity medicines simply by taking a 10 milligram gummy 3 times a day. The second thing is insomnia. And Mary, if you log on to MyMSTeams at night, there's a bunch of people from all over the world who are up. And some of them, it's daytime where they are, but sometimes it's nighttime and they can't sleep and they're up and they have pain and they have a host of things going on. They can't sleep very well. And cannabis has been rather successful in my clinic in helping people with insomnia. So that's been fantastic. Nausea and poor appetite is another problem, not for most patients, but for some patients, and cannabis can be fantastic for that. And where I find cannabis to be arguably surprisingly helpful is with mood. So it's not an antidepressant, but it helps with irritability. And I'm going to give you a great example. A patient of mine is a cyclist. He likes cycling. He has a Peloton bike and he bikes out and he really, really likes doing it. But when he really gets exercising and his core body temperature raises, he goes blind and he can't feel his legs and they burn. And so previously he would stop exercising because it was wholly painful. Well, he shares that if he uses medical cannabis, it's not that he doesn't lose vision or his legs don't burn. He just doesn't care. And so he's able to keep on keeping on because he can tolerate the discomfort so much better with cannabis on board. So I am a believer, and I do think that there's a role.
Well, thank you for breaking down some of the symptoms. And I think the biggest one that a lot of people would really resonate with is number 1 and 2, pain and insomnia. And what we have, I know we have articles about this on my MS team, pain insomnia. And we have discussions about that. So thank you for that breakdown. We have Debbie who's asking, Debbie who's asking, are there drug studies? This is off the topic from CBD. Drug studies ever beyond or the original clinical trials? You kind of talked about listening to your patients, but we're talking about clinical trials, which I know you're involved with at times. When thousands of people are taking a drug, are there ever updates? She's just wondering about, what is this whole process? How does something, how do we get the drug to everybody?
That's a great question. And so when a drug is developed, it surprises a lot of people when they learn that a drug, when it hits the market, has been in study for typically 20 to 25 years. Yeah. So when you find out a new drug, it's not new to a bunch of scientists and doctors that have been studying it for decades, trying to get it ready. And leading up to the FDA approval of a drug, there's a phase 1 trial where you give it to poor college kids and see if they blow up. It's a safety trial. And then there's a phase 2 trial where you give the drug to people with MS, but you're looking at the MRI as a surrogate marker. Then you do the phase 3 trial, which is most of what I do in my center, which is where you study the drug to the satisfaction of the FDA to bring it to market. The question is a very enlightened question because we don't stop learning about the drug after it's approved. And there's several ways that we address this. Number 1 is through extension trials. So when I complete a 2-year or 3-year trial with a patient, invariably they are then offered an extension arm where they go on the study drug. It's open label. There's no surprise. They know what they're on and they get it for free and they're being monitored in the same way they were in. It's an extension of the trial so that we can learn about the efficacy and safety. And I'll give you an example. There are drugs that have 10 or 15 years worth of clinical trial data. So when a patient starts that drug and asks a question about what happens 10 years later, I can answer that question. A second way that we learn about drugs in the post-marketing setting is by investigator-initiated trials, where doctors like myself may come up with a clever question based on what they're seeing with the drug in clinic. And we can write a grant and we can get a little bit of funding and put together a research project where we can then execute and answer that question. And so there's a tremendous effort after a drug has been approved to better understand it. That is definitely something which is very, very keen for all people involved.
It's a great answer. This is kind of related to some things that are new in the news for many people. Marion wrote to say she's had MS for 6 years and it hasn't really progressed. She's interested in getting a stem cell transplant to try to stop the progression, but she wants to know if stem cell transplants are effective and safe.
So stem cell transplantation is not a drug; it's a procedure, and it's a rather serious procedure. It's arguably one of the most serious procedures that a human could undergo. Very briefly, you take out someone's stem cells and put them on ice, and then you murder them. You give them lethal doses of radiation or chemotherapy, and you ablate their immune system. They have no immune system. So you think about like John Travolta, Boy in the Bubble. If they get a cold, they would succumb. They would die. And then you give them back a nascent immune system and pray that it takes. And the idea is you're removing the autoimmunity and you're replacing it with a new immune system that doesn't make that same error. Now stem cell transplantation has been studied in MS for many, many years, for over 20 years. And from when I started studying way back in the day to now, we've come a long way. It used to be a morbid procedure, which is a doctor word for people died. And thank God we're not seeing deaths the way that we used to. But it's not prime time. It is not prime time yet. And I want to give a special call out to a concern, which is a concern of the FDA, and that's stem cell tourism. Because right now, if you travel to an exotic location like India or Mexico or Chicago, and you pay someone a bunch of money, they'll swap out your bone marrow. And sometimes they're doing a real stem cell transplant, and sometimes they're not. And sometimes they're being open and honest, and they're providing follow-up, and sometimes they're not. In my clinic, I've received many, many patients that have gone elsewhere to receive a stem cell transplant, and then I'm trying to pick up the pieces and kind of help them. So I think stem cell transplantation is very exciting, and I think that it will become a mainstay for very, very aggressive MS within the next 10 years. But I do not recommend it outside of a clinical trial today at the end of 2021.
So the short of it is there is no FDA approval. The cost could be your life if you're doing this tourism. And the availability is just not there because in the US anyway, and actually worldwide, legitimately, because there's just not enough there yet. So hopefully that answers your question, Marion. Great question. It's time for another poll question for tonight. It's related to stem cell transplant. So if you were given the opportunity, let's say it was approved, would you consider a stem cell transplant? And again, I'm thinking under the conditions of, it's past all of its.
Yeah, so it's an approved therapy, and it's got a clear safety profile.
Clear safety profile and protocol to follow. Yeah, I am curious, and so you have answered my follow-up question too, which was you have patients who have gotten this, but outside the country.
Both. I was an investigator in a stem cell transplantation trial called the HOLT trial, where we did some stem cell transplants in the context of research. But I've also had more patients go to exotic locations and then come back to me. And some of them are doing very, very well, and some of them have gone on to have disease activity. Stem cell transplantation is exciting and it is growing, but it's not prime time.
Great. Let's see what our audience thinks about it so far. Yeah. Some folks are hopeful, but many are unsure, and I'm not surprised by that. And 30% no. There's just I can sympathize. There's just not enough information perhaps to actually feel solid about it. But there are people who feel it's exciting, maybe worth doing once it gets approved. So you had talked about these various trials and so forth. A question we'd like to know, and I usually ask you this, but do you know of any upcoming MS treatments or potential breakthroughs as you've been keeping an eye on things? We haven't talked for a few months here. Okay, great. So we're going to 2022. What's the news?
So since we last spoke, Mary, my head has become very, very enamored with a small little molecule called butyrate tyrosine kinase inhibitor, or BTK inhibitor. And these BTK inhibitor molecules are extremely exciting. There are 5 different manufacturers that are all involved in clinical trials developing these drugs as what I think might be one of the next best things in MS. A BTK inhibitor does 2 things that we've never seen before. Number 1, it blocks B cell signaling without murder. So it doesn't kill the B cell, it just makes it so you can't hear it. So la la la, and if you can't hear the B cell, then it doesn't hurt you. The second thing is there are cells of the immune system. They're part of an immune system called the innate immune system. They live in your brain and they're very active in MS. They're called microglia. And we've never been able to touch them. We've never been able to get at them. And these BTK inhibitors turn them off. The other thing about these BTK inhibitors is they're not associated with infection. And so as we treat MS during a global viral pandemic, a drug that acts on both the adaptive and the innate immune response, a drug that penetrates the central compartment and turns off cells that we've never been able to touch, and a drug that doesn't increase risk of infection is very attractive. And so right now, I'm involved in many, many clinical trials helping develop these BTK molecules.
That's great to hear. On the other end of the spectrum, I'd like to introduce Marilyn, who this is gonna bring up a topic that you've talked much about regarding medications and taking away medications. She uses 25 medications.
Wow.
Gained weight. She doesn't want to go out, and it makes her depressed. And she goes to bed at 3 a.m. even though she has sleeping pills that try to help her sleep. It's just not working. What do you suggest she does as a plan of attack and working with her neurologist? And with 25 medications, I can't imagine they're all coming from her neurologist.
So there's a term that we have to consider called polypharmacy, which is a doctor term for, gosh darn it, you're on too many medicines, right? And so 25 medicines is a lot of medicines. And what I would start doing is I would go to each of her doctors and say, hi, which medicines are we removing today? Say, I want to go through every medicine you prescribed, explain to me why I need to be on it, and explain why it has to be that high of a dose. Tell me which ones we can cut back. Tell me which ones we can get rid of. And I would try to be draconian and get that list down. And I would do that with my neurologist, with my psychiatrist, with my general practitioner, with my cardiologist. I would tick, 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 tick. And the second thing is, as you move forward in time, if the good intending doctor suggests a pill for some ill, say, okay, doctor, if I take that pill, which one will you remove? Because I'm not going net up. So there's got to be an exchange program. If I take that one, which one can we get rid of?
What's the phrase that Marilyn can use? I mean, I know you said polypharmacy, but what's a phrase that will signal to the person, to the doctor, to their provider, that I'm overwhelmed, I'm feeling like it's too many meds, I want to partner with you, please, about my care? Is there a phrase or a sentence that can get honestly, them in?
If they're comfortable saying the word polypharmacy, that's the word I would say. And here's why. It's a doctor word. So when a patient who is not medically trained says a doctor word, I always ask, why do you know that word? And it starts a conversation. So if she comes in and says, I'm very concerned about my degree of polypharmacy, I'm going to say, wait. Why do you know that word? And then she said, well, I was on this thing and we were talking and all these people and there's too many medicines, and it will lead to an organic conversation. So poly means several, pharmacy means drugs. So I would actually say, I'm concerned about polypharmacy, and then let the doctor respond to that.
I think that's great. I think that's a great opener. And it also helps the person come across as more informed, but not a know-it-all, because we don't know it all. And we're asking for help around the situation, the degree of polypharmacy. Thank you so much for breaking that down. One
more tip is honesty, and say, I don't know why I'm on this many medicines and I don't know what they all do. So it's my opinion, if I give you a medicine, you should be able to tell me what it's for and what the side effects are. If you don't know that, I'm not doing a good job, because that's my job. So if the patient tells the doctor, hey, I'm confused about why I'm on these medicines, that should be a red flag to the doctor that something ain't right. And so that's another tip or trick that you could use.
And absolutely. And also to adhere to one medication, much less 25.
No way, man. I mean, that's a lot. And, there are people that are on a bunch of medicines and they need them, but I would still challenge my doctors and say, I want the list cut in half. What can we get rid of? Right. I've been on this one medicine for 7 years. I don't even know why I'm on it. You haven't talked about it in a long time. Can we get rid of that one?
Right. And I'll just add that there are studies showing that people over 65 are on an average of 7 different medications, and that's over 65. So we don't know much more about Marilyn, but Marilyn, hopefully that helps you get on that path of getting off of getting onto the path that will make you feel better and sleep through the night and whatever it is you need to live a better life. We're heading off to the top of the hour. I'm just double checking to make sure. There was one final question that Heidi had asked, and I didn't get to it before we wrap up. And it's really around how to broach the topic with an employer about MS. Um, Dr. Boster, have you had conversations with your patients who maybe have faced or have been concerned about facing discrimination in the workplace or fear of losing their job or anything like that, and how they've talked about MS?
This has never been more relevant than during a global viral pandemic, when patients impacted by MS are on immunosuppressants and struggle to mount COVID vaccine responses. So Mary, it's a very, very timely question. And it's probably top of mind to most people listening right now. And it's most certainly top of mind to my patients and families, because I had no less than 20 conversations today about that, quite literally. So as we think about work in the workplace, and we think about disclosing your condition to your team or your employer, what have you, there's a lot of emotions involved in that. And there's some legal stuff involved in that. So first of all, you're not required to do that, right? So it's not like you have to do that. Now, I am of the opinion that if you're comfortable sharing, it's a good idea, because then they are able to know that you may need some help at some points in time. For example, if you disclose your diagnosis and we set up a FMLA, Family Medical Leave Act, that's created by the federal government to guarantee that they can give you time off for medical stuff and they can't fire you or give your job away while you're doing it. And so I'm a big fan of people impacted by MS and their families having FMLA. I want the wife of my patient to have FMLA so she can take him to his appointments. And so that's very, very important. The other thing I want to point out is the concept of accommodations. So many of my patients, they want to keep working, but they have trouble doing it the way they've been asked to do it. And I'll give a very contemporary example. I have a patient that was considering quitting her job because going into the office was so exhausting, like the act of like getting dressed and getting in the car and driving 40 minutes, the whole kit and caboodle. So she's been working from home and crushing it. She's laying waste to the competition. By not having to drive in, she saves all those spoons for work. And that's an accommodation that we were able to get for her. And it's changed everything. Now, some people, they may not be able to do 100% from home, but they may be able to do something a little bit different. For example, are you eligible for a closer parking space? For example, can we make sure they let you come off the line for 15 minutes every 2 hours? You know, there's a host of accommodations which allow someone impacted by MS to work and be gainfully employed. And so the challenge to you as you listen to me right now is to ask yourself, if I had a Harry Potter magic wand and I could just wish into existence a work accommodation, what would it be? And that's what I want you to ask your MS neurologist about. I want to say, hey, if I was allowed to not have to park in the garage, if I could park up front where the executives park, I would be able to get into work and I have so much more energy. Do you think you could help me with an accommodation to that extent?
That's great. I'm seeing all these great comments coming into chat and questions, and I'm just reminded of how many events we've done together, Dr. Boster, and it's been so fun, right? We've been doing this for over a year together.
We've kind of been hopscotching through the pandemic together.
Yes, we have. And we have not met in person. I don't know if everyone knows this. This is the only way we've known each other. But I will say, Chris Cormack, the topic about sex and MS, we actually did a recording for that. So there's a video of that event. So maybe some folks can put a link into chat for that. Don't leave, we'll get there. We've done topics about the COVID vaccination. I know there's a lot of things going on with Omicron and the evolution of this COVID-19 and the various variants. And so we'll probably have to touch on that later. But in the meantime, it's at the top of the hour now, 5:01 my time. You can already tell the sun's set here. I was relying on natural sunlight. Thank you so much, Dr. Boster. We appreciate all of your insights in the best ways to deal with fatigue, stress, and pain related to MS. I'm Mary Ray, co-founder of MyMSTeam. Dr. Boster, thank you so much.
It's my honor, Mary. Thank you very much for having me. As always, thank you for learning about MS with me. And I'll look forward to the next time that I can meet with this amazing MyMSTeams community. I love you guys. You do fantastic work. Come visit me on my YouTube channel, Aaron Boster MD, and come see me on Twitter at Aaron Boster MD. Same thing on Facebook. And so until the next time we meet virtually, God bless and be safe.
Absolutely. Everyone, we hope to see you at our upcoming events in the new year. The information and support doesn't end here. If you're already a member of MyMSTeam, please share the helpful advice you received today with other members in the activity feed. Talk about your questions to the polls that we asked earlier. If you'd like to become a member, just go to mymsteam.com and you can sign up for
Do it.
Remember,
join.
Remember, you're not alone. Take care, everyone.